Okay, you're live, Commissioner.
And do you have the letter that was sent to us?
I do.
Oh, you do? So I was going to have Travis do it, but if you've,
I'm happy to read it if that's what you'd like.
yeah, okay. Um, well, let's get started. Welcome to the Cumberland County Commissioners amended meeting agenda of Monday, April 26, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. The county commissioners presently hold their meeting on Zoom with the public being able to observe on YouTube video, streamed live on cumberlandcounty.org/live. If you wish to submit a public comment regarding this meeting, please email it to kennedy@cumberlandcounty.org. Cumberland County is all one word, prior to or during the meeting. With that, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Manager Gailey, please call the roll. And as I know, Commissioner Coward will join us later.
Commissioner Jameson,
Here.
Commissioner Cloutier,
Present.
Commissioner Witonis,
Yes,
Commissioner Gordon,
Here.
and Commissioner Coward will be joining later.
Thank you, Jim. Comments from the public. Travis will read in a public comment. I understand it's by Sue Haas, and I ask you to read it into the record. It's quite well put together, and the backup information is with it.
Okay, we've received one public comment so far, and I will read it now. And there are several attached materials that I believe all of you have received. Good evening, my name is Sue Hawes. I've lived in Cumberland County since 1995. My husband worked at Cumberland County Jail from 2006 until he was medically retired in 2018. For the details, please refer to my written testimony from your September 10th, 2019 meeting. Just 6 years ago, in March 2015, the sheriff representing himself and the county commissioners testified at the Maine State Legislature and persuaded the state of Maine to relinquish control of the jails back to county management. There's an attachment number 1. On October 2015, Sheriff Joyce made staffing cuts. He cut 2-man posts to 1 man with 86 inmates. See March 2017 FOA. That's attachment number 2. Beginning on March 13, 2017, I spent a year testifying monthly at the Cumberland County Commissioners meetings, expressing my concerns about the staffing issues, including the inability to retain staff, the exorbitant and growing reliance on overtime, and an increase in holdovers when the officer is prevented from leaving at the end of their shift, known as forced involuntary or mandatory overtime. The commissioners did nothing but deflect to the state for more money, demand that more employees accept more overtime shifts, and repeatedly vote for a jail overtime budget line representing less than half of the actual annual overtime expense. Meanwhile, the jail workforce was decimated. The sheriff now reports 50% of the positions annually funded with county and state tax dollars at Cumberland County Jail are unfilled. In August 2019, I inspected the record of that first March 2017 meeting. The written testimony and documents submitted to the commissioners are missing from the county manager's record of the meeting. Enclosed, please find replacement copies, attachments 3 through 5. The fallout of the refusal to act by the sheriff and commissioners has resulted in a destroyed jail workforce. Anyone who could afford to leave county jail employment has left. The unemployed are not applying for a job where every workday there is a 1 in 3 chance you'll be told you cannot leave at the end of your shift. Just think for a minute about the exhaustion and chaos that creates for personal health and family life on top of an already intense job. After ignoring the ever-worsening staffing crisis for years, even after the July 2019 death of Raylan Bell, the sheriff has finally asked for a meeting with the commissioners to discuss the crisis at the jail. I understand this meeting to discuss the jail status will be held during a workshop tonight after the monthly public meeting and an executive session. Workshops not normally being recorded. Mr. Gailey has confirmed this workshop will be recorded and posted online. I look forward to finally hearing an action plan before there are more deaths. And that's the end of the comment.
Well, thank you, Travis. I appreciate that. The comment I'll make is that these are tough comments and questions. And whereas I don't agree with all the positions that she's taken, I'd still like to thank her for her timely comments. As she, like the rest of the public out there, those who we serve. I don't know if any other commissioners wish to make a remark, or we'll move on. Seeing none. New business. Item 21-029. May I have a motion to authorize the county manager to sign the proposed building and parking lease between the Maine Judicial Branch and the Cumberland County government on behalf of the county?
So moved.
Second.
Jim, please give us a brief oversight on the proposal, after which I'd like to go into the discussion. However, I'll tell the commissioners right now, if our discussion it becomes apparent that our discussion gets into too much specifics because of the contract issue, I'll be asking to go into a brief executive session, maybe 5 or 15 minutes, to discuss more fully so that before Jim signs the order. So discussion, anybody have things they, oh no, I'm sorry, Jim, please give us the oversight.
All right. Thank you. As the commissioners are aware, for about a year now, we have been working with the state judicial system on a revised lease agreement for their portion of the Cumberland County Courthouse. As many of you know, when you enter the courthouse, everything off to the right-hand side of the building is occupied by the state courts. Everything off the left is somewhat occupied by county government, as well as some of the court space bleeds over on the second and third floors of our building, the older portion. So we're talking really the new section of the building. I say new, it's 25 to 30 years old. However, that's how we still, in comparison to a 1908 section, that's new in that world. Back in 2011, the county came in agreement with the state courts on a 10-year lease. That 10-year lease is expiring on May 31st of this year. And there was a need to have conversations with the state judicial to see about what the next lease looked like. So over the last 8 or 9 months, Bruce Tarbox and myself have met with the state on numerous occasions, bouncing back and forth language and financial terms in an attempt to bring forward the draft to you this evening. One thing I should make mention is that the approach that Bruce and I tried to take going into this negotiation was to try to find a level balance field, as we both felt that the 2011 lease that was joined by both parties was very heavy to benefit the judicial system and not the county. And unfortunately, over the last at least 6 years, we have been limping along and really subsidizing that lease because the language within the 2011 lease did not have the appropriate language that allowed it to change year over year. It didn't have any escalator clauses. It was a pretty much static lease that was negotiated 11 years ago or 10 years ago. And those dollar amounts remain the same for a good portion of that time period. So we moved in a direction that we felt as though we needed to get a better handle on what our costs were and to cover the cost. We were not out to make a profit on this lease. As we all know that it's taxpayers' money, whether you take it out of the left pocket or the right pocket. We only wanted to make sure that the county was made whole. And so I have about 6 items here that I just want to run down through, which is the bulk of the changes to this lease. It's all in your packet, so the The spreadsheet is in the packet of information you received. It's also posted online, so if anyone's watching at home and wants to see the difference between the 2011 and 2021 lease, it's right in there. But quickly going through it, as the commissioners are aware, the lease includes parking spaces within the county's parking garage. They currently have 125 spaces, of which they pay for 50 of those spaces, and 75 spaces are free based on I think it was a 1993 agreement back then. The proposal is to bump that up to 129 spaces. And I'll get a little bit more into the funding side of things in 1 second. Under section 2 term, the current lease is a 10-year term ending this year. We're proposing a 20-year term with a option for a 10-year extension. Under number 3 of the lease, the rental, it was broken up previously into the first 1 to 5 years and then years 6 to 10. In the 6 to 10, we receive $474,000. And that we receive is for staffing, is for supplies, and for small capital items. The first year of this lease that it's in front of you this evening, we have now at $611,000. That's $311,000 for staffing, $100,000 for supplies, $120,000 annually for small capital items, and $80,000 annually for capital bonding, which is those numbers are true reflections of the staffing costs that we have on an annual basis. We're also now sharing 50% of the large capital items, and we also received an increase monthly on the smaller capital items. Under the parking, like I previously talked about, they had 75 free parking spots and 50 spaces that they were paying $80 each for per month. The new parking arrangement is for the first year is at $150,000 for 125 spaces and $6,720 for the 4 additional spaces that they wanted to add into this lease. So if you net out what we are receiving today to what we are proposing to receive year 1, that is going to be an increase of $108,000 annually in parking, which will help us significantly go towards capital items for the garage that are mounting up. Annual escalators, the current lease did not have any annual escalators. The new lease has a 2.5% escalator on wage and benefits annually, and a 2.0% for supplies and miscellaneous items. That is in hopes of keeping this contract alive year over year, and the county does not lose ground in covering our costs. I've already talked about the renewal. We have an option for a 10-year renewal after the initial 20 years of the lease. There have been some covenants changed and or removed completely. One of the largest was we were on the hook for a $1.5 million insurance policy to cover our liability in the building. That has been reduced down to the $400,000 Maine Torts Claim Act as required by the county for liability insurance. We were also on the hook for $1 million in auto insurance, which I wasn't sure why. So that was completely removed. The one item that we did include in there was that the county was going to paint and recarpet the rooms on a 10-year cycle. So there was some small capital projects inserted into number 9 of the lease. Lastly, I want to talk about just the exhibits. And I won't go through all the exhibits, but in working through modifying this lease to current day times, we went from, 2, 4, 6, 7 exhibits down to 4. And so in a nutshell, Bruce Tarbox and I both think this is a very responsible budget. lease. It is one that's going to keep the county whole year over year for the next 20 years, if not 30 years, if the option is called upon. And it's one that brings a greater balance between what we provide the state and what the state receives for not only space, but also manpower. So I will stop there. Your packet does include both a clean copy of the lease and a red line copy of the lease. So if you want to jump into what it looks like all redlined and what changed, by all means, you probably have already over the weekend, but I'm available for any questions that the commissioners may have. Thank you.
Discussion. Hearing none. Are we sure? Jim, the one thing that I'm not sure of is what happens if they need to take more space? Is there any, is that just a renegotiation?
That's going to be an easy question, Commissioner, and that is because we don't have any more space. We are completely at the gills in the building. We are putting people in closets at this point. There is no available square footage for them to expand into, nor the county to expand into.
Okay. Enough said, I guess.
What about parking spaces?
Parking spaces, the way, if they wanted to go over 129 spaces, we would go into adding on to the 4 spaces. And I believe those 4 spaces, if I'm right, I think we're charging $120 per space. That is subsidized over what we charge for a monthly space right now. I think we're at $155 a month space.
Okay.
We felt as though we could subsidize. They were jumping up from $80 to $120, and there is a schedule within the lease to bump that up every 5 years.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll ask the manager to take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Watonis,
Yes.
Commissioner Jameson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cloutier,
Yes.
Commissioner Gordon,
Yes.
and I don't see Commissioner Coward here. So show the vote 4-0. Coward absent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, do we have any further public comments?
I do not.
Thank you. Well,
Commissioner, if we could, we have an adjournment of this public meeting and go into workshop.
right. May I have a motion to adjourn the formal meeting, after which we'll go into a public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor, just nod. I declare we're adjourned. Okay, now we'll go into I'll open up a public hearing. And let me say this, that we have with us Sheriff Joyce, and we've asked him to come and discuss an overview of the jail and its present issues. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as of today, we're at 59 vacancies with one criminal complaint still outstanding, one individual on administrative leave with pay. It is true back in 2015. Prior to that, I kept 15 vacancies because under the Board of Corrections, there was no guarantee that we would ever be funded. And the last thing I wanted to do was lay people off. Also at that time, overtime was important to people. And there was not a lot of it at that time. As time has gone on, we've continued to hire in fits and starts periodically, or continually, actually. But recently we've had retirements. We've had 2 lieutenants in the last couple of years. retire. We've had some people promoted to jail administrative assistant, sergeant, release planning. A couple individuals went into law enforcement. We've got individuals that have claimed they're leaving based on other offers of benefits and salaries, et cetera. We started a per diem project the end of last year, the first of this year. We have 5 people on it. And with the exception of one individual, the other 4 are people that used to work here that they haven't really, they've worked one shift maybe. So that hasn't been helpful. Major Courts started that as something that he thought would help us out. Some of the people that have left, it's been their dream. They wanted to get law enforcement, or one individual got a JAG assignment, et cetera. You can't hold people back for that. A couple years ago, when we were hiring, I remember Chief Deputy Naldo Gagnon getting phone calls and meetings because we were trying to guide people along to get them through the hiring process, to latch on to them so that they didn't leave, to make sure that they knew people were interested in them working for us. And that seemed to work for a while, but it hasn't been working in the last several months. I do have a group of corrections officers that have hung in there. They're hardworking. When I walk through the jail, I see the tiredness on their face. Like I told the media, we run a jail that's 24/7, 365. I cannot really control anybody who comes in. If they've committed a crime that's arrestable, then the police department can bring them in. The number of inmates hasn't gone down any. It's gone down a little bit in the last week or so because we're not accepting arrests in because of COVID. But once we open up, it's going to shoot back up there again. So it becomes a problem that, we've cut back as much as we can. A couple of years ago during negotiations, the concern was we were operating at minimum staffing or close to minimum staffing. Now we're operating at minimum staffing and sometimes a little bit below that. This is not a Portland, Maine issue. This is an issue that's been coming across from the West Coast. My colleagues in similar positions have seen it in both corrections and law enforcement. And I sit here to tell you that right now, law enforcement wise, we might be stable, but we're going to see that come as well as when I see emails of agencies throughout the state looking for law enforcement officers. So this is only the beginning. I spoke with the commissioner of Department of Corrections a week ago to check into some options. He's down 80 corrections officers, but their total staff for corrections officers is 700, so it's about 10%. So his 80 doesn't impact as much as our 60 does for our small group, or small group considering. 2 Bridges, they're down 15 to 20 people. York County's down 30 some odd people. The only anomaly is Androscoggin. If you drive Route 100, drive 302, drive 22, drive any of the big routes, you see flags and signs that say looking for employees. So we have a lot of competition. Some people are bold enough to throw out starting pays that is a little bit more than ours. And I've heard of some places, not necessarily in Maine, but not too far from us in New England, offering $50 gift certificates if you just fill out an application. And they haven't given a lot of gift certificates because people aren't looking for jobs. We reached out to Lake Region High School a couple weeks ago because they have a law enforcement program. And I thought, well, okay, let's try to get in, because up until a few years ago, you had to be 21 to even get a corrections job. And then somebody brought to my attention that we had an 18-year-old looking for it. And I kind of thought, you know what, if an individual is old enough to give his life for the military, why isn't a person old enough to be a corrections officer? We lowered that to 18. So getting back to Lake Region, I thought, well, maybe we can do a virtual presentation to the senior class, see if the law enforcement staff there or the law enforcement people would be interested in a job in corrections, because I'm a firm believer that over half of the law enforcement staff that we have started in corrections and they are a lot better than I ever was when I started as a patrol deputy here, because they know how to deal with people. They know how to talk to people. They just got so much ahead of somebody starting and never working in law enforcement or corrections. And it's a great training ground. So I thought, well, okay, well, maybe we can get those folks to jump on, maybe get a commitment for 5 years. By then they're 23, they can go off, be a law enforcement officer. The instructor sent an email that was kind of disturbing that basically says, yeah, I'll check with my seniors, but I got to tell you, they're not a real motivated crew. Last summer, I ran into a couple of people that were furloughed from the travel industry, and they were disappointed. They, weren't getting paid, or whatever they were getting paid was minuscule. So I suggested maybe they come grab a couple of corrections jobs. They could work until the airline industry went back, and it would give them enough money to pay their bills, et cetera. Both of them, they weren't together, separately, advised me that it was beneficial for them to collect unemployment plus the $600 at that time, than it would be to come work for us at the jail. So I kind of threw my hands in the air, walked away, and I really have nothing for that. We know that we've got to change. The work-life balance is big. And I will tell you this, I think most of the people, some of the senior people that are leaving now or have left, it isn't because of the money. I mean, they work overtime, they're in my generation where you work overtime and you put away money, but it's gotten too much so that maybe the work-life balance, we all have heard people give up jobs and we scratch our head going, they were making a ton of money. It must have been really good, but they wanted to be home with a family. So I see that as a concern. For the new kids or the people coming into this career, they want quick promotions. I don't know if we can do a whole lot for that. They want schedules that have the weekend off, or in some cases, they might tolerate part of the weekend off. It's a different format than what I'm used to and what people of our generation have been used to. We've looked at the policy to see what else we could change, like uniform or grooming. We've been in contact. We've got a contact down at York Community College who's always pushing out that we're looking for corrections officers. A year ago, because the alert test, which is something that's required to be taken by anyone who wants to get in corrections or law enforcement, they were only offering it one time a month in Cumberland. So we decided last year that one time a month, we're losing people in that 3 weeks that it comes, that we can't get another test through. So we started offering one at the sheriff's office. And instead of having the people pay the $50, I absorbed the cost of paying the $50, hoping that we could get people in. What we've seen is 4 people sign up, 1 person shows up, or 2 people shows up. Nobody calls. I've been really pushing the staff, the command staff, to get back to making hiring a priority. And currently we have 5 people that have been on this list for probably 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even a month, maybe even 2 months. And when I start pushing the command staff and HR, what I'm finding is that we're making contact with these individuals, but they're not returning contact. We give them paperwork that they have to fill out, whether it's for the polygraph or they have to get signed for their physical agility, or just answering questions or filling out the application. And we're constantly going after them and trying to get them to fulfill this. Now, we still do it, but if an individual can't fill out the paperwork correctly or doesn't return calls, they may be a viable candidate, but is that an indication of what they're going to be if we do hire them? So we're at a point where if I have too many more resignations, I've got to do something, because it's at a breaking point where the staff could get hurt, the inmates could get hurt. We cannot operate on inmate counts that were set for 128 people and be working with 68 people or 70 people or whatever. The mandated overtime, I waited until the contract negotiations were over. I thought that should have been done a long time ago. And spread that out. That seemed to work in the early 2000s, I understand. And that may have helped some people out, but we couldn't get there. The bottom line is that we're not getting employees, we're not getting applicants. We're competing against hundreds of other places that want applicants as well. Some of these folks, you walk in, we'll offer you a job. And I've looked at our hiring process to say, what could we do to even compete with that? Well, the reality is we do a physical agility. We may be doing away with that and doing with something different. The polygraph, I think you're penny wise, pound foolish. We do away with the polygraph because the public has trust in the people we hire. And even sometimes when we do get a good polygraph, sometimes we miss things. So I can't offer a job on the spot for that. So I am going to be left with trying to lower the inmate count. Through COVID, I've kind of hung on to the fact that if somebody met a certain criteria, were sentenced, because I can release folks on that, that if a couple months out, if they met a certain criteria, I'd release them early, because eventually they're going to get back to the community anyway. And that seems to have worked all right, but there's certain criteria. And even under this, there would be certain criteria, but maybe it's not 2 months, maybe it's 6 months early. It may end up being that even though I have no authority, I tell police departments that unless you have an individual that's broken a certain law, we're not going to take them into jail. I know that there's a fallback on that, or there's going to be a fallout on that because some of the police departments in your jurisdictions, they're dealing with people that a warning is not a deterrent, a summons is not a deterrent, and frankly, arrest and going to jail first, second, 10th, 20th time is not a deterrent. But it takes care of the problem at 2 a.m. when you want to just take care of the problem and not have to deal with it. I've considered the possibility, but it comes with a cost of returning York County inmates. But even if I return York County inmates, it doesn't help us. We need to go deeper than that. So individuals that are doing sentences, we've had conversations about the fact that, the criminal justice system plays games with the sentences so that we can keep people local, keep them at the county jail and stuff. So maybe we see if we can board those folks out to Department of Corrections, where probably in most cases they belong anyway, but it has a financial impact to it. The reality is that I look at my list of 5 people. It will probably be the same 5 people next week. One individual I already know has been released from another jail, but we're going to look at him. And just to fill a spot with a body, it's not my interest to do that. But we'll take a look to see if there's anything viable there. The reality is we need to find a way to attract people. The profession of corrections is a great profession. I tell people that there's 2 types of people that come into it, the people that want to go into law enforcement, and I've talked about that and the experience you get. And then there's the other where you can really, because everybody else wants to go to law enforcement, you can really make a great career and move up through the ranks if you so choose to do that. And you can make an impact on people. But I think that there's just a lot of things that are working against us. COVID, I've got people that are doing jobs that a year ago they thought they were going to ride out their career in their spot. And because of COVID, we shut it down. And they're a little bitter at me and the world and everybody else because that job that they thought they were going to work the rest of their career has gone away. I wish I could turn back the dial and make it happen that they're back there. But, you know, we're moving into a new renaissance of unknown. I don't have answers for the corrections officers that are sticking with us and that, you know, have the expectation they go back to where they came from. And I don't think you do as well. But what we do have right now is a vacancy problem that at 15 seemed reasonable, and I stand behind that decision back then. And as closely as time has gone on, we haven't been able to hire people interested in the profession quick enough. And now I think it's accelerated because of the fact that there's just too much. And although some of the people like the money and the overtime, if you don't have time to spend it and time to spend with your family, then it's time to make a change for something that is. So that's really the state of where we are now. And I guess I'm just looking for other insights on what we can do, because I know that some of the colleagues and some of my colleagues are in the same spot, and we don't have the answers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I've heard similar things myself, talking with other commissioners. Do commissioners have questions of the sheriff? Jim?
Sheriff, I went online as anyone can and looked at the inmate roster for the county jail last week. And it's, you know, there's no indication necessarily of who's serving some kind of a sentence versus a probation hold versus a, you know, pretrial detention. Of course, I'm a practicing lawyer, and although I don't do a lot of criminal law now, I used to. I have partners who do, and the system hasn't changed very much. It is possible, for instance, for the probation department to basically create a situation where bail is very difficult. Clearly, people who are indigent, if they don't have a particularly engaging appearance, can end up having to kind of, and if they don't have a lot of money or resources or parents or friends or whatever, they're going to not make bail at 10 o'clock on a Friday night. They're going to be talking to a judge who's likely to be saying, well, what about the bail project? And the bail project takes a week or two because they have an intake process. As a result, I started out by doing a hard count of people that had been there since before 2020, and it seemed like an enormous number of people, like an unacceptably huge number of people. You know, we're talking, I didn't really count them all up because I got tired of counting, but it seemed like it was more than several dozen people that have been there since 2018 or 2019 and are still incarcerated, and who knows what their status is. So I've suggested to some of the people on this call that I think that part of the problem here is the perception of the old turnkey as the role of a corrections officer, and we probably would be well advised to start looking at a less paramilitary organization, a less hierarchical organization, something that is much more tuned into some of the things that you've already mentioned tonight, that you have an obligation and an opportunity, and it's a good one, to be helpful to people who frankly do need some help, many of them. So I have to say, I'm really confounded by the whole milieu, and I don't think being a better sweet talker to somebody who might express some passing interest in the job is going to really address our problem. And I think you've correctly observed that this is not just a Portland problem or a Cumberland County problem. It's not just a Maine problem. It's all across the country. And there's probably something intrinsic in the nature of the work and the responsibilities that bear with it that makes it difficult. So I have to say I'm completely in sympathy and understanding of the difficulty and the complexity of the issue. But my own idea is that we won't solve the problem unless we take some bold action. And one of those, I mean, we know there's a financial result if, for instance, all of those people from 2018 and 2019 are sent to the Department of Corrections. That will then precipitate, frankly, a pretty pointed discussion about why we should be paying for that. Also seems to me like, as you said, some police departments have the right to bring somebody to the front door and leave them at the booking desk. Well, those people are probably just as eligible for immediate bail as anybody. And there is such a thing as a bail commissioner. And maybe we ought to be a lot more aggressive about that. I mean, people are scandalized to hear that 60 or 70% of the people who've been incarcerated for periods of time are simply awaiting a hearing, especially given COVID. There are no hearings. I mean, you fire up Zoom and hope you find a judge and a DA who's had some opportunity to actually look at a file, which is not likely. So it seems to me like we have a big problem and one that requires some pretty aggressive action. Now, I have assumed that that our 60 vacancies has included kind of the 15 vacancies that we never filled anyway. I'm aware, of course, that we felt compelled and appropriately so because of the pandemic to close the community corrections facility. And we have budgeted for a tier of officers on duty that is kind of our optimal budget. And then there's some lower duty rank that is our minimum. I remain of the view, and I've expressed it for years, if we get to the point where it's not safe, then we need to close the jail. And that's all there is to it. I don't think that the people that work there should be in danger. I don't think that the inmates should be in danger. And we have a responsibility that's transcendent when it comes to safety. So, these are just kind of my ideas. I don't know of any place where the corrections operation is less hierarchical. I see them trying to dabble around that possibility with the juvenile center in South Portland. They don't seem to be making a huge amount of progress as far as somebody on the far outside like me can tell. But it's I think the status of the profession and the status of the job and the understanding of its purposes needs a higher and better understanding in order for recruitment to have any good chance of success. And I really have some reservations about asking somebody who's a high school graduate only to come into the system. I mean, there are college and associate degree criminal justice programs in Southern Maine, and we really, I do think, want to decide that we need professional standards that we all agree are important. So that's kind of my rant today. What happens, there's going to be some transition. I'm not saying it's going to be good, but the pandemic will come to an end, and some of the, but I really don't think there's a lot of future corrections officers that are out there cashing unemployment checks and thinking that, that's a good way to subsist until the pandemic settles down. That it might be true, but I doubt it. So that's my rant, and I appreciate you coming. I appreciate you indicating the severity of the situation. I think we all knew about it anyway, but it's probably good for the public to hear about it too.
So a couple things, Commissioner. We are going out to colleges. I use the high school as just an example because, sometimes I think, one of the things that kids struggle with too is the cost of college. And, we do have a reimbursement program, and if we could kind of latch onto them, it's on the job training, whether their education. We do the main, but I mentioned today that we got to do like the Old Orchard beaches and Wells when they try to find reserve officers, just maybe go New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, to see if people want to do it. You're correct. The job of a corrections officer is not that turnkey job. I mean, you're a social worker. I mean, it'd be great if you could have social workers come in there because, I mean, that would really help us out. But even social work can't find social workers. There's just that pool is dried up. We talk about that with mental health and maybe having some assistance with that on the law enforcement side and respond. So, and then the stack up of people, and I think you hit it, court closed down just like everybody else. And they've been getting some things done, and actually it's been pretty good that they've gotten what they've gotten done, given the circumstances they've had to deal with, like the rest of us. But even at its best, we have had some people lingering for one reason or another. We've had people in there doing their sentences that should have been at a state facility, but the way it was laid out, they're in the county jail. So I will say that it's not all bad. The police departments have worked with us when we've needed to just accept certain inmates. They've been good. They've tried to do the best they can. It's not that I haven't heard stories from police chiefs that, hey, I had this one thing, and I sit there and go, yeah, I mean, that person probably should have been arrested, but we weren't accepting them at that time. So, I can't fault the police departments. They got their job. The police chiefs got their job. They're trying to do the best they can. They don't care about the staffing of the jail, and I don't blame them. I shouldn't say that they do, but it's not within their purview, and they want to just take care of their community the best they can, much like I want to do it with our community as well. So, thank you, Commissioner.
Neil and then Jim Gailey.
Thanks, Steve. Sheriff, what is in your estimate, what's the breaking point in terms of estimate of time? Are you looking at a month? Are you looking at it 6 weeks? And would at least not taking your county inmates alleviate some of that immediate pressure?
My breaking point is really tonight, this week, next week, as far as, York County. I mean, it's filled a need for York County, and it filled a need for us financially for a bit. But, even if I send those folks back, nothing changes per se. I mean, maybe maximum 30 people we don't have to deal with. I reached out to the commissioner to see if he's got space for his, some of the probation holds. I mean, some of the probation holds, they're pretty lofty, as Commissioner Clutie mentioned. They're not going to get out. And I get it. I guess you want to show them a lesson, but, what lesson are you showing them? I've always said that, we can't continue to get tough on crime. We're going to get smart on crime and make sure we're locking up the right people and what the jail was actually set for, and not being a place where we just put castaways and hope that when they get released, their substance use disorder is fixed or their mental health disorder is fixed. So I'm saying probably Commissioner Jameson that, I can't wait another week or 2 or 3 to have a plan. Whether or not we execute the plan or not is another story, but got to have a plan. It does have financial ramifications because, we've charged people, so they could charge us. And I guess that's understandable given the circumstances that we're all in. But that sounds good tonight. It may not even work out, but I'm not going to wait another week or so because, the hiring is just so slow and we're not getting new blood. We're not getting anything.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Jim Geely.
I just wanted to pass on a couple of things, 2 items that I thought the commissioners would be interested in hearing. One of the discussions that we are having amongst staff is the possibility of seeking out and hiring on a recruiter. As one of our primary focuses for that recruiter would be the jail, if not the focus of that recruiter. That recruiter could team up with a few individuals from the jail who would be able to be kind of somewhat of a recruiting team. But more importantly, the recruiter would be a person there that is their sole focus is to bring applications into the HR office. And so we're hoping that further discussions around that and hopefully the eventual hiring of a recruiter would be of benefit for not only jail positions, but there are other tough positions that we have a hard time filling within county government. And I think that's a kind of a sign of the times and something that we need to take seriously and pursue. We're also talking about those individuals that are in that secondary education. They might be going for their bachelor's or associate's degree in a program around New England, if not within our region, to look at scholarships or some kind of financial support that attracts them to Cumberland County as a place to work, whether it's while they're taking their classes or upon graduation. We are having discussions with some individuals already around what that would look like. So there are a few things. Do we have a laundry list of items? No. But we are having conversations among staff on ways that we can really focus in and really start looking at how we can bolster the numbers down at the jail. It's unfortunate that the sheriff's reporting that those who are applying are not really all that interested in getting back or pursuing the application process. We're hoping that maybe some of our steps over the next 30 to 60 days will create a better solution and a better process that unfolds. It's all to be seen. Like the sheriff said, one of the biggest things that we have up against us is the federal portion of the unemployment that's really making it attractive for people not entering the workforce right now. So we got to overcome that. We got to overcome what the market is out there. And so the conversations are ongoing, but just wanted to share those 2 items with everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Jim Cloutier?
I was just wondering, what's the, is there an active opportunity to recruit women to serve in these capacities? What's the kind of the gender breakdown of our team at the jail that's in the front lines, so to speak?
It's probably, well, we've had a couple of departures, but it was right around 15 to 17%. I can tell you both law enforcement and corrections, especially law enforcement, is looking, and we always strive for an employee base that's made up or indicative of the community you serve, and trying to get females on, people of color, joining us as well. But again, it's difficult. And that is something that sitting on a board for accreditation, every law enforcement agency struggles with that. There's very few that meet that criteria of having a workforce that replicates the community they serve. So,
And one other thing, if I could, is it possible for us to get a summary of what somebody has to go through from the time the thought enters their brain that they might want to be a corrections officer to the point where there's a qualification?
absolutely.
Yeah, that would be great. Because I do wonder, the major, you said, initiated a per diem kind of program a few months ago. That, I do remember in years past, when we were operating a dungeon on Federal Street, that there were, kind of weekend part-timers and holiday part-timers that would pick up a shift and work at the old jail. And that, that was a common thing for quite a while. So understanding whether that could even be an actual possibility for someone who doesn't have an existing license would be something I'd be interested in knowing how that works.
I think what we're going to see with that is, I mean, there's a 6-week training period. So, and it's 6 consecutive weeks. So let's say you have your job and you want to work part-time because you want to see what corrections is like. We may have to look at that. We locally and try to, because the academy, it's 6 weeks training, we may have to look at it.
Is that 24/7, the 6 weeks? Or is it?
No, they travel back and forth, but it's 5 days a week for 6 weeks, and we may have to think about it and say, you know what, we'll put on the training here, which we've done in the past, and we'll do it, nights or weekends or something like that. I mean, those are the changes that we got to break out of the norm, shifts. I mean, we're looking at shifts now. Somebody who's done 30 years and made his way or her way into having weekends off doesn't want to hear this, but the new people want part of the weekend off. And I get what they're saying, and I get what the senior people are saying, because you work your way to it. But we got to start thinking differently, because as we drop off from the profession and the new people come in, that's why it was important to get a great retirement, no age. Now, did some of the senior people gain anything for that? Absolutely not. But it was a recruiting tool for those who are interested in retiring. But I'm not lost on the fact that I was 23 once too, and I signed up for retirement, and I almost didn't because retirement seems so far away. So we know an 18-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 23-year-old is not looking at retirement, but those are good benefits that we do offer, that we got to somehow get out there and hit what impacts the new employees of tomorrow.
Sheriff, I have a couple of questions. One, could you explain the change in the prisoner culture, say, over the past 20 years? What the culture was like then and what it is now? My understanding is that it's got a lot tougher.
I'm probably not going to do it justice. But I'll try. Probably somebody in my command staff that's worked in corrections could probably do a better job. But I think you do have an influx of people from out of state that come up here and commit crimes and get caught. And, they are probably not real bad dudes where they come from, but up here they're considered that. So they can be problematic. But the officers usually do a real good job of dealing with them. It's all about respect. And we can look across the board and find those people that deal with inmates and treat them with respect, and they get the respect back. And generally, those are your seasoned officers, and they're laid back, but they know their job and they get it done. If they get a corrections officer that doesn't respect them, then that's going to be problems. You've got a lot of people that are mentally ill. And probably 30 years ago, they were mentally ill, but we weren't calling them mentally ill. I will say from my own experience, the police officer today is spending more time at calls dealing with mental illness than I ever did when I was out there, because mental illness was generally somebody that was going to commit suicide or something. Now it's a daily basis. So, you know, the corrections officer is dealing with a lot of folks like that. And then substance use disorders, you know, individuals that their priorities are mixed up. You know, some of them have a job, some of them have a family, some of them have a criminal past, and some of them have a substance use disorder. And unfortunately, the substance use disorder comes first, and then they get caught up in the system, and they need to reprioritize. And then some people don't have any of that stuff. So it is a difference. But I think the expectations of a corrections officer are different as well. You know, at the old jail, we locked them up in a big cage, and, you know, everybody had their 5 or 6 feet of space, et cetera. Now everyone's got their room, and we're asking one corrections officer to manage up to 84 people. Now, the comment made way back at the beginning of this meeting, when I reduced it from 2 to 1, was the fact that it was brought up that if we did half tier people being out, in other words, 42 people instead of 84 wandering around, then you could have one officer, and collapsing that position helped pay for some retro pay under a different contract. So that's never thrown in there, that there was a reason for that, you know, given. But we've gone into, you know, split lockdowns where 42 people at one time are out and the other 42 are locked in. So, you know, just like law enforcement is different than it was 30 years ago, different than it was 10 years ago, corrections is the same thing. And, you know, I do think that the good corrections officers are going to be like social workers, and they're going to embrace the fact that they're making a difference. They're solving crimes. I tell people, if you take a good fingerprint, you take a good photograph, and you take photographs of an individual's tattoos, and you record that, that becomes a library that the law enforcement can get to, and you can solve a lot of crimes that way, you know. But they don't get the TV shows made after them that they solved a crime. And generally, they don't get the media, the positive aspects of it. And so they're the forgotten part of the criminal justice system as well. I don't know if I answered Commissioner Gordon, but it has changed.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was looking for, is that it was changed. The one thing that I'm seeing, and it's because of broadening my experience in talking with more and more commissioners across the state, and with other sheriffs too, is that jails have now turned into what I call the public service of last resort. And what I mean by that is when the community doesn't know what to do with any individual, they get picked up, they're causing an issue, or they're just unknown. The only place they take them is jail. And you know, we're batting around this issue. The state is beginning to pick it up a little bit, but if you were going to create a mental health facility, you certainly wouldn't use the jail for it. Or how you treat addiction, the same thing. Homelessness, same thing. And yet that's where we take all those people. The other thing that disturbs me is that I understand that we get people that are into servitude there. You know, a woman that's forced into prostitution, and where does she end up? Jail. Well, I think our own culture has got a problem. And because counties are, this is my opinion, because counties are what counties are in this state, and we're not costing the state money, we're costing the property owner money, we don't get the observation of others because of it. I firmly believe, as Jim pointed out when he went and looked at what the prisoner list was, and I do look at that about once a month, and I'm appalled. The number of days that people have been there and they haven't seen any kind of a court service. If judiciary had to pay for those people being there over 9 months, I bet you they'd find a way to start that court moving. Now, that's just my opinion, but There's nothing like charging somebody some money before, and they all of a sudden they get a little bit of justice. I'm really concerned about that. We've got people in this jail. We've got some people that have been in that jail, I think, over 400 days, and they have not gone to court. That's just not right. It's not right. And longer. Okay, is any other has any other commissioners got questions about this issue or about the jail or and what our sheriff is trying to do? I thank you for bringing some of the ideas to us, and I don't know ideas is the right word, but information. Jim Cludier.
Yeah, I would just very quickly say, I think there ought to be a result from what we have been doing so far here tonight. And one thing I would appreciate is a kind of a breakdown of how you become a corrections officer, basically from soup to nuts. But beyond that, it does seem like we might ask Jim Gailey and the sheriff and Don Brewer. The recruitment idea sounds like it has some possible merit. But the sheriff is right about one thing. We need a plan and probably need it sooner rather than later. So maybe if we could have something to look at as soon as possible, that would be good. Just my suggestion.
Anybody else got a thought? All right. Don Brewer.
Yeah, Chair, I just wanted to share with all of you and also with Kevin. I did have a conversation today with Southern Maine Community College, their business manager, to take a look at what proactive, creative partnerships might be able to forge with their students who might want to get into the corrections field, law enforcement. And I know that we had tried to do something back in 2006. You probably may remember this, Sheriff, with tuition reimbursement in exchange for a couple of years of the students performing as a correction officer. I wasn't here then, but I understand it was marginally successful if we got much at all. We also, today I was told by Brenda Downey, who is the business manager, that Bath Iron Works, Maine Health with their nursing program are in a similar situation as we are. And they've forged an apprenticeship program, a creative way for potential students to work side by side. In our case, with a correction officer, once they get the training, and there could be some incentives on both sides. So we are looking into those types of creative, outside the box thinking. In fact, Kevin, I might want to maybe work with a couple of your command staff to maybe follow that through. I am going to get some information on how that works, but it's working for Bath Iron Works, Maine Health with their nursing, and some other employers. So it might be worth taking a look at to see if there's something we can glean from that. It's not going to solve the whole problem, but if we can get a few, that's more than we have now. Thank you.
I would say, I was looking at the same thing, and I think that, the collective we, needs to be a little bit flexible because, if you're a full-time student, and maybe even the college, it's hard to work and go to school full-time. But, I do knowing a lot of young kids that they get sticker shock when it looks at the cost of college and what it's gone through. So if somehow we can make it good that they get a degree and they work towards us paying for it. But we got to work that into a schedule so that they're not, going to school all day, working all night. That's not positive. And then the other thing is, trying to think outside the box on schedules. Because like it or not, I've looked at some other police departments, they're moving to different schedules to meet the criteria of what people want coming into the profession. And it doesn't really meet, what we're used to, but we gotta move, because if we don't, they're gonna blow by us and go for somewhere else. So I appreciate that, Dawn. That's a good idea.
Jim Cludier.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, we mentioned money more than once here tonight, but I have the distinct impression that the price of poker has gone up, and we're going to be spending money somehow as the future years come upon us. I think the whole world knows that we get our money once a year on a tax assessment, and we're right in the middle of the year at the moment. So our next round of budgeting won't be until December, really, or doesn't even start on a preliminary basis for a few months. But we're going to face some new expense, and that's just the way it is. So I don't think that people should be particularly reticent about those kinds of opportunities that were just being discussed if they turn out to be real. I mean, we have a long-term problem. This is not caused just because there's a temporary unemployment compensation adjustment. And so that, to me, that makes a lot of sense. And I hope I'm sure there are other ideas, and I think we have to, like I say, encourage a new way of looking at this. The other thing about money, frankly, is, we come for better or for worse, we should try to put ourselves in a position where we can have a very pointed conversation, particularly with the state. They pay us $25 a day to board their people, which is ridiculous. We all know that it costs $130 a day. I hope the time has passed when you didn't work off a fine at $5 a day by sitting in the county jail, because we're a daily loser at $125 a day for that kind of nonsense. And that was, frankly, in my memory, that was very common. And I believe that's what the law still says. But, that all, Steve, you were 100% right that authority and responsibility need to go hand in hand. And when other parts of the justice system are easily at will can impose on us substantial costs, then that's out of balance. So that's it. And I promise to shut up from here. I mean, I've said a lot tonight already.
Well, actually, Jim, you took it out of my mouth. If nobody else had brought it up, I would have said, the public should not be surprised that what we're talking about costs dollars. And this county runs very close to the bone. And so if we have to, and we know we've got to, put some effort and some financing into some of these programs that we're talking about here, there's no doubt about it, is the cost to the taxpayer is going to go up. If there's nothing else that we want, does anybody else have any comment? Or I think it's time to move on to the last topic of the public hearing. Jim, a review of proposal by U.S. Board of Geographic Names.
Yes, this is always an interesting one. This is I believe it's the second time we have been approached for the commissioner's opinion on naming a stream, or I think the last time it was a pond somewhere up in New Gloucester, Pownell area. This one's a stream, and they're asking for the commissioners to weigh in whether you have any objections to a tributary of Meadowbrook in New Gloucester being named Talking Brook. I know, I get it, but it is something that we got to respond to them. This stream runs through a number of communities and a number of counties. And so I believe it's Androscoggins being asked, City of Auburn, Town of New Gloucester and ourselves. So it is something I wanted to get on because if the commissioners have no issues, we can put it on a consent calendar item on the May meeting, and we can just let them know that we have no concerns about the naming of this tributary Talking Brook. So just a quick but a formality here in hopes of lining something up for the May meeting. Thank you.
Now, if you said Old Mill, I'd have been right there with you. Any other comments?
So
Go ahead, Jim.
Jim, I thought you told us you weren't going to say anything else.
we're on to a new project. I just don't understand the process. Does the town of New Gloucester have they already blessed it or what? Why are we involved? I don't get it.
We're involved because not only the local communities are asked, but also the counties are asked. So that's why we're being asked, much like why Androscoggin's being asked.
So I guess our answer is we wouldn't object.
I guess.
Right,
Oh.
if the other communities and entities don't object, we shouldn't,
Yeah.
we should support it. But if we're going out on a limb, no pun intended, then that's a different story.
All right, next business meeting. Any other comments? Then this is just a hearing. I'll close it. Thank you. Travis, you can turn us down.
Perfect. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Everyone have a good night.